Hi, my name is George Shevchuk, and this is Upright Guide Ministry. You can reach us at uprightguide.org. Today is March 14th, 2015, and this is my first sermon. I'm 61 years old. I'll be 62 very soon. My father, he died at the age of 61. So I had a motivation and a feeling that it's time that I start doing more than being just a reader of the Word, but a doer of the Word. So I wanted to share these thoughts with you today. This stage that you see behind me was created by my son, Constantine, and with the help of his sister, Oksana. And I'm very proud of them, and I think that they did a wonderful job. I think that Constantine's very talented. He also wrote a play, and it was called The Journey of Miracles. This sermon, by the way, I call it what it is all about. And hopefully we can touch on the milk of the Word of the Bible and get a little bit into what is known as the meat of the Word of the Bible. The reason why I wanted to start this with this stage background, besides bragging a little bit about my son, is to show how this could not have happened by itself. It needed a creator. And this is just an artificial scene, winter scene. And I can't help but think to myself, and I hope that there's other people, that many other people, that think and realize that creation is not something that can happen by itself. There is a tendency in the universe to go from a state of order to a state of disorder. Scientists measure this by a word called entropy. The only thing that I can see in my life that travels in the opposite direction is life itself. As the universe slowly degrades from a state of order to increasing disorder, you see life moving in the opposite direction, almost like a riptide. If anyone knows what a riptide is, there's a current that is not coming in with the waves, but it's in the middle of this powerful force coming in on the shore, but it's traveling in the opposite direction. It's pulling back out to the sea again. Or a river within a river, where the main river is going downstream, but there's a little river in the middle. It's going in the opposite direction, and that's life. This requires a life force and an intelligence. It's not something that can happen by itself. For example, now that I'm speaking a little bit about science, not that I'm a big scientist or anything, but I know some of the basics. In cell division, which in basic high school biology is called mitosis, you see the different stages of how a living cell divides and turns into two cells. And as a result, all living organisms on the earth grow and prosper and reproduce. These things just don't happen by themselves. There's a life force. Scientists and the world does not speak about this very often because it can't explain it. But no one knows what this life force that causes the DNA to start separating and all the steps in mitosis, there are different stages, I forgot what they're called, to actually complete itself to become two cells out of one cell. The thought that I hear about atheists and agnostics or whatever. I don't know. To me, an atheist is a fool, because how could you possibly explain that, number one? But the bigger question is that how is it that atheists don't understand that there are things in the universe that we do not comprehend as of yet? But they think that everything can be explained away someday, but there will never be a creator. I can't see that. If this stage can be created by my son, then this world has to be created by something much more awesome than my son. And that, to me, is my God. In the Bible, sometimes there are people who call themselves Jehovah's Witnesses. Some people call him Yahweh. Some people call him Yehovah. Very interesting. In the Bible, there is it speaks very often throughout the Bible of the name of the Lord. But it doesn't mention the Lord's name, because the Lord is not a name. The Lord is a title. As it turns out, that the early Hebrews felt that the name of the Lord was so holy that it could not be spoken, which is kind of like that principle of getting so intelligent that you become stupid, and now we don't actually really know what the actual name of the Lord is. There are some people that make a big deal about that, with whether you call Jesus Jesus or Yeshua or Yeshua or whatever. I think back and I look at the miracles of the creation of the United States of America and the relationship that George Washington had with God, and he called him Jesus, and it was a miracle. I mean, if you know anything about American history, the whole revolution was a miracle, and even after the revolution, how God protected Washington from the British invasions and different things that happened were miraculous. And George Washington called him Jesus. So, generally speaking, I'm pretty much of the school of thought that a rose is a rose by any other name. I call him Jesus because that's the name that I know, and that's the name that's tender to my heart. But if the name that's tender to your heart is Yeshua or Yeshua, whatever, the main thing is that it's the person that we are worshiping. I mean, if you call him Ralph, that would be ridiculous. But I mean, as long as your heart is in the right place and you're trying to do the right thing, I think that is the main essence of the situation in regards to Jesus. I wanted to speak about many different things here, and I don't know how much time there's left on the memory of the camera, because I'm starting out. My equipment is relatively inexpensive. But I wanted to touch on this whole creation issue to start off with. Also, I wanted to move on a little bit and talk about this God and this relationship and what it's all about. And I think what it is all about is God's relationship with us. This relationship started out with Adam and Eve. Now, and that creates another big argument about creation versus evolution. I know that this may sound heretical to some people, but as far as I know, the whole Adam and Eve model was something that the Hebrews adopted from the Sumerians, or the Sumerian culture. And I don't really see any conflict, and I think this whole debate about evolution versus creation is just a diversion. The bottom line is that whether God snapped his fingers and we all came into being, or whether it took billions of years of evolving for us to get to a certain stage at which God decided that he wanted to make first contact with humanity and picked out a man, and through that man, and his genetics made a woman, who's to say? And what difference does it make? I mean, I don't want to sound like Hillary, but it doesn't really make a big difference. The main point is that God did create us. And just because you believe in evolution doesn't mean that you don't believe in God. I mean, evolution can't happen. Somebody has to start the spark of life, and somebody has to guide it along. People have a tendency to want to put God in a box and limit him. The Muslim culture is very down on Christianity because they don't believe in a God that is divisive, or there's three parts to him. They believe that our God is one whole God. Well, okay, you have a God that's one whole God, and I have a God that can do anything. And if he wants to divide himself into 3 parts or 10 parts, he can do that because he's God and there isn't anything that he cannot do. That's the God that I believe in. So therefore, if my God is a Father and a Son and a Holy Ghost, and if that achieves his purposes, whatever they may be, who am I to want to limit him in his methods and techniques? But that's a whole different sermon. Getting back to Adam and Eve, I think the whole essence of the whole situation from the very beginning, obviously, was revolved around obedience. And the first step when you have a child and when you develop a relationship with a child is you have to teach the child obedience, because unless the child is going to obey your instructions, you're not going to get anywhere, and that child is not going to get closer and closer to you and be more like you, and that child will not benefit from your superior wisdom and knowledge. After Adam and Eve went through what they went through, throughout history there were periodically men that did acknowledge God's wisdom and did love God. People like Enoch and Noah. And then later on, of course, we have Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and the whole thing starts where you have the formation of a group of people known as Israel, that is God's chosen people. This is another subject of a lot of debate, God's chosen people. There's a movement called the Identity Movement, and they believe that God's chosen people are, in essence, the white race. I thought about it, and I tried to look at it objectively. One time, a long time ago, I was just got out of work. I really didn't have that many friends or relationships. I was very young. I wanted to go to a New Year's Eve party. I didn't really know where to go. I went to some bar, and the bartender there, no matter how much money I had in my hand, he said, "No admittance, you're out." So he just threw me out, and I just said, "Oh, the heck with it, I guess it's not meant to be." And I just went home, and that was my New Year's Eve that year. But still, there was a pain of rejection. And I don't see nothing to be gained by rejecting people and saying, "We're the chosen people, but you're not." The words that resonate in my mind when I read the Bible is when Jesus said, "My sheep know my voice." As it turns out, there's a lot of white people, Caucasians, that are Christians, and they do hear God's voice. But I think there's people all over the world of every kind that respond to Jesus' voice. And I believe today, especially after Jesus, the true meaning of God's chosen people, the true Israel, are the Israel that was drafted into the vine. And they were drafted into the vine because they were able to connect with the message. And that is the most critical thing. What good is it if you're an Israelite but you hate God? What good is it if you are born an Israelite but you walk in the ways of Esau and Edom? That doesn't benefit anybody. So anybody can be an Israelite in his heart, and everybody can hear the voice of Jesus, and it's a matter of comprehension and faith and obedience. If there is a bloodline connection, it is not something that anybody should beat their chest about and be prideful about. If that does exist, all it means is that you have a job to do, and you need to be doing God's work, that you are servants. By the way, on the subject of servants, it reminds me about another issue that is a very big issue in Christianity, and a source, in my opinion, of a lot of misunderstand